Masechet Yevamot, Daf Tet Vav. Exciting daf, should be pretty smooth. We are dealing with the question. There was machloket. Did Bet Shammai practice their own opinion, or did they follow Bet Hillel? And everyone did the same thing. This is important because what you think about lotit kodedu will depend on it. If you think lotit kodedu is more expansive and one cannot make factions at all, then we have a problem with Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai doing their own thing. So then we'd have to say, well, they're different cities or the same city, but different Batei Dinim. So we have to limit lotit kodedu if Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai practice their own opinion. On the other hand, if Bet Shammai followed Bet Hillel, well, then there's no problem of lotit kodedu there. They all did one thing. And so that would be support for those who have a more expansive definition of lotit kodedu. So the Talmud is going to bring 11 cases that will question the opinion that says they did not practice their own opinion. We already saw two of them. And actually, the first one already responded that, oh, they must have practiced their own opinion, but they'd let each other know. And so actually we started with a solid question. Nevertheless, we're going to bring today will be 9 more cases, and then we'll see one last one tomorrow. Today will be 8 more cases. We saw 2 already, so today will be 8 more, and then will be 1 more tomorrow. Okay, so we begin with this case. Tashem Adamar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, He'ach halacha zoro vachat b'Yisrael. Yochanan ben Nuri, Tana says, how can we allow this halacha to continue where you have a fundamental machloket about sarat arva, and one says allowed, one says not allowed, a case of mamzerut? We need a resolution. If we all agree, let's say we can get everybody in the same room on the same page, and we all agree to follow Bet Shammai, that won't be good because Bet Hillel will disagree, because that child will be a mamzer. Since if you go ahead and take a brother of sister-in-law when Yibum does not apply, that's simply adva, a sur karet, and my children are mamzerim. Let's say we can tell everyone follow Bet Hillel. That won't be good either. Havalad pagum l'divrei Bet Shammai. So then that child, first of all, if she does not do chalitza when she has to and goes and marries outside, that's in the surah lav for her. And furthermore, the child will be pagum, meaning will be a non-kohen. If it's a boy, a non-kohen. If it's a girl, she halala, she will not be able to marry a kohen. On the next amud, we're going to give the proof why she is pagum. And so either way, we're going to have long-lasting problems that will last generations. So here's the solution. Bo nitaken lahen lasarot shiu cholsot velo mityabemot. So let's make a takana that anytime you have such a case where the Yavam and the Yevamah are related in the Sur Arva, and so for sure that person cannot be taken. But the co-wife, let's make a takana that we will always do chalitza for the co-wife and not yibum. And that way it won't be yibum, so it won't be a problem of erva for Bet Shammai, and we'll do chalitza, so it won't be a problem of yibum for Bet Hillel, and we'll do chalitza, so Bet Shammai will be satisfied also. And this way we'll satisfy all opinions. They tried to do it, but they were not able to get that legislation passed through the Sanhedrin. Perhaps there was a time of war with the Romans or something. It doesn't specify exactly what happened, but whatever the reason is, they weren't able to continue, and this resolution never was passed. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, during that discussion, said, in any case, that will only help people from now on. But what about the people that already in the past, maybe they did yibum and took their erva's co-wife, and those children will be mamzerim, and you're not helping them going forward. This is like the halachic prenup that we have been using for the past 20 years here. That's been helping a lot of people from now on, but people who got married before this was instituted are still have a problem with aguna. So that's his question, right? You only have half a solution, and there's still all families of mamzerim that are a difference of opinion between the two houses. What are you going to do about them? Good. That's the end of the Braita. Here's our question. If Bet Shammai actually practiced their opinion, now we understand why it says, what should we do about all the people that followed Bet Shammai and they did Yibum and now they're Mamzerim according to Bet Hillel. So it only makes sense to ask this question if they actually practice their own opinion. But the opinions that said Bet Shammai never practiced their opinion, then what's the problem? There would be no questions, no problems of anything that ever happened in the past. That's the challenge. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, la nisracha ela lesara atzma. ומה נעשה הכי הנח שרות לבית הלל לבית שמאי, הכי נעביד להו. The question was about the Sarah herself, because now she, if you follow Bet Hillel and don't do Yibum or Chalitza, she just goes and marries someone from outside, she herself violated a lav. And so now, what will we do with them? For the Sarot of Bet Hillel who did not do Yibum or Chalitza according to Bet Shammai. Lichalsu, what should we do from now on? Lichalsu mima'aseh gabraihu. See, once you make a new takana and say everyone has to do Chalitza from now on, yeah, but there's women already that did not do Chalitza because they were following Bet Hillel, and now they're married. And it's 10, 20 years later, and they've been married this whole time. All of a sudden, we come and say, takana, anyone in that situation has to do chalitza. So then they're going to go to each other and says, we never did chalitza, right? And so if we're going to make them do chalitza now, then the husbands will be repulsed. Oh, this whole time we were living in sin. We were supposed to do chalitza, and they're going to do chalitza after that chalitza that she goes back and does with the yavam. That husband's just gonna be disgusted by her, and so we want to keep shalom bayit. And if you say, okay, so what? That's their problem. Let the husband be disgusted with her. That to think that this whole time she actually had a zikah with the yavam, and he's been with her in sin. Although they're just, this is a new takana, they're doing it just to cover all the bases. Nevertheless, once you make a takana and everybody's doing it from now on, people are going to feel bad and disgusted. So we can't let that happen because Mishle says all the ways of the Torah are pleasant and peaceful. And so it's impossible that we should make any law that will cause a disruption of shalom bayit and cause people to be disgusted and break up families. And therefore, that is impossible. We cannot do that. Okay, this is just a very beautiful halacha that you always have to take into consideration the pleasantness and ways of peace of any of the Torah and any halacha that we have. All right, so that's what they were worried about. Even if Bet Shammai was not practicing their own opinion, they still were worried about those who already followed Bet Hillel and didn't do chalitza. If we do chalitza now, that will cause new problems. All right, so we'll try another one. Tashema damar bi tarfon te'evani matai tavo sarat habat liyadai ve'esa'ena. Rabbi Tarfon, he sometimes followed the Bet Shammai, like in the case of lying down, right? He said, he tried to lay down to say Shema like Bet Shammai. So in this case also, he says, I wish, right, how I desire, if only one day that such a case will come to me, that my daughter will become a Yevamot, and I will marry the co-wife. So perhaps he in fact had a daughter who was married to his brother. And this is a kind of a strange thing. He's like hoping that his brother dies without children so that he will be able to marry his daughter's co-wife. like Bet Shammai, and that way he can show in practice, right? It's hard, this doesn't come up very often, but he wishes that it would happen in practice. Okay, I don't think he's actually saying something negative about his brother. Maybe it's more theoretical. I don't know if he actually had a daughter who was married to his brother, but he's saying the point is, I would do it myself. Okay, now, so isn't that a challenge? Because that means Bet Shammai followed their own opinion. After all, the Bitalfon says here, I wish I would follow, this case would come, and then I would follow Bet Shammai's own opinion. So we assume that other people from Bet Shammai also actually practiced what they preached, right? No, Emma ve'asiena. Maybe what he meant to say is, I wish that it will come to me and I will marry her off to someone else, like Bet Hillel does. If my daughter is married to my brother and he dies without children, then I wish that would happen so I can demonstrate that I'm not going to do yibum with the co-wife, but rather I'm going to marry the co-wife off to someone else without chalisa. So that's what he meant to say. All right, if that's what he meant, then why would he say, I hope, my desire is to do this? If you're just following Bet Hillel, like you don't say that on a regular basis. If it's a regular plain halacha, if everyone follows Bet Hillel, right? I wish I'm going to do the standard halacha. What's the point? There's no protest. And the answer is, it is a protest against Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who we just saw in the previous source. That's why this source comes after that one. And he said that we should make a takana that everyone has to do halisa. Even if you follow Bet Hillel, be machmir for Bet Shammai and do chalisa. He says, no, I was against that takana. This is probably one of the reasons why that takana never passed, right? There were people that had problems with it. We saw one issue with it that was just quoted, and here's another. Rabbi Tarfon says, no, I wish, if I came to me, I would not do chalisa. We shouldn't be machmir for the Bet Shammai. We should just do Bet Hillel all the way and allow the person to marry out without chalisa. So in fact, his desire is exactly opposite, to not even take into consideration Bet Shammai at all. Okay, next objection, Tashema. Maaseh b'bito shel Rabban Gamliel shayta nesu'a le'aba achiv umet belo banim v'yibem Rabban Gamliel et sarata. Okay, an amazing story. Just now we had Rabbi Tarfon who says, I wish I could do yibum with my daughter's co-wife. Here we have a case of Rabban Gamliel who actually did it. He had a daughter who was married to his brother whose name was Abba. It's a little confusing. His brother's name is father, but okay, that was his name. And that brother named Abba died without children, and Rabban Gamliel performed yibum with his daughter's co-wife. That is, Abba had another wife. And so there you go, he actually did it. V'tizbera Rabban Gamliel metamidei Bet Shammai hu. And so now we're wondering, how could this be? Was Rabban Gamliel a student of Bet Shammai? He was a descendant of Hillel. And so he must have followed Bet Hillel. So what's going on here? Must be that this daughter was an Ailonit. Remember, an Ailonit, someone who cannot have children, and she cannot do you cannot do yibum. Yibum does not apply to an Ailonit. If she was not known to be an Ailonit beforehand, then that whole marriage is called a mekach ta'ut. And so they were never married. So according to that, the daughter was never even married to Abba retroactively. And if he knew she was an Ailonit, then yibum would not apply at all, because you can only do yibum in order to bear a child that will uphold the name of the dead, and Ailonit cannot do that. And so that's why in this case, he was not following Bet Shammai. So don't bring this as a proof that he followed Bet Shammai. He was a Bet Hillel person anyway. No, the only reason that he performed yibum with the co-wife in this case, because the daughter was an Ailonit, and yibum does not apply. Good. So that's a good answer. However, Hamid the Katani Sefa, we didn't bring the whole source here. The next part of this Baraita says, Acherim omerim bito shel Rabban Gamliel Ailonitata. Because the Tanakama savar lav Ailonitata. The Sefa says that she was an Ailonit, and that's why he did yibum with the co-wife. But that means that Tanakama disagrees and says she was not an Ailonit. If she was not an Ailonit and he performed yibum with his daughter's co-wife, that means he was following Bet Shammai. So how could he follow Bet Shammai? He followed Bet Hillel anyway. And if you say, so in this case, he followed Bet Shammai, it proves that Bet Shammai did follow their own opinion. And so we give three possible answers. Number one, hikirba velo hikirba ika benaihu. No, maybe the difference between Tanakama and Acherim is that both of them agree that it was an Ailonit. The difference is that Tanakama thought it was a case where he already knew. No, the case where he did not know she was an Ailonit when they got married. And that's why it turned out she was an Ailonit, and so retroactively the marriage is null and void. So in fact, his daughter is not married to his brother, and that's why he did it. Acherim think that no, it was a case where he did not know at all that she was an Ailonit, and that's why. Right, Haita. She did know that she was an Ailonit. That's why he says the word here, Ailonit Haita, and he married her anyway. But in Ailonit, so the marriage is not null and void, but you still cannot do Yibum with an Ailonit because it says Asher Teled. She has to be marriageable in order to do Yibum. Okay, so there's machloket about does the Ailonit case a law apply in this case or in that case where he knew already or didn't know already. But in fact, both the Resha and Sefa are an Ailonit case. Or maybe the Tanakama thought that this was a case where he married and then divorced her. In other words, he married off his daughter to Abba, his brother, but then she was divorced. He divorced her, and then he died. So in that case, that's why, because she was divorced at the time that he died, Yibum would not apply to her because she was already not his wife, and that's why he's allowed to marry the co-wife. We saw already a machloket between whether it makes a difference whether the marriage happened after he married the co-wife or before whether the divorce happened after they married the co-wife or before he married the co-wife. And so that's the subject of the machloket. Tanakama says it was that case. And then Acherim say, no, that case wouldn't apply. It's a case of Ailonit. Okay, or a third answer. Maybe they're arguing about a conditional marriage. If someone says, listen, we're going to do this kiddushin, this nisuin on condition that you don't drink, that you get a job, that you don't have a beauty mark. And so this conditional, can you do that even after the couple has bi'ah? So one opinion says, the condition stands and this will be a conditional marriage. And in this case, Rabban Gamliel, the condition was not fulfilled. And so the marriage of his daughter to his brother retroactively never happened because it was based on a condition. And that's why, since they were never married, Rabban Gamliel took the other wife, that's just a regular case. Whereas Acherim say, no, once a couple has bi'ah, then that undoes the condition, whatever condition they make, because that shows that he wants her, because nobody's going to sleep with someone and then be in sin retroactively and have the relation outside context of marriage. So the bi'ah itself undoes the condition. This is actually very important and relevant to laws of aguna today. One proposition to resolve agunot is to say, let's make the marriage on condition that if one day they separate and he decides to withdraw, to not give a get, then they agree that this marriage will never have fulfilled this condition and never have been a good marriage. And that way you can never have a problem of aguna. The problem with that is exactly what it says here. Once they actually live together and are intimate together, that shows, according to one opinion, that they are annulling the condition. So that's the difference between Tanakama and Acherim. And so therefore, we can say that in any case, all these options, the point is Rabban Gamliel did not follow Bet Shammai. He married his daughter's co-wife because It wasn't really his daughter's co-wife. His daughter, for whatever reason, was never married or was an Ailonit, and so was excluded from the law of Yibum. And when it's not Bimkom Mitzvah, we're not in the context of Yibum, one is allowed to marry the co-wife, even if they are of his daughter, even if they are married. Okay, Mativ Rav Meshar Shia. Next challenge, Ma'aseh. This is going to begin a series of 4 cases that all begin with a Ma'aseh. Rabbi Akiva sheliket etrog be'echad b'shvat v'nahag bo shenei isurin. Rabbi Akiva plucked an etrog. Let's say it was the 2nd year of Shvi'it, in which you have to give Maaser Sheni. But it might have been the 3rd year in which you would have to give Maaser Ani. So let's see. Well, which one is it? He did it on the 1st of Shevat, Rosh Chodesh Shevat. According to Bet Shammai, Rosh Chodesh Shevat is the Rosh Hashanah for trees. So since it's on Rosh Chodesh Shevat or later, then that's already into the 3rd year of Shvi'it, and now would be Maaser Ani. But according to Bet Hillel, it's before Tu B'Shvat, and according to Bet Hillel, Tu B'Shvat is the new year for the trees, and therefore it's still the 2nd year of the Shemitah, in which you would have to give Maaser Sheni. And so Rabbi Akiva is, because he did it on the state, Nahag bo Shenei Isurin. He gave both Maaser Sheni and Maaser Ani. So that looks like he is following both Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. Achad kidbre Bet Shammai v'achad kidbre Bet Hillel. Shema mina asu. From this story, we can see that Rabbi Akiva followed Bet Shammai too. And it means that everyone else who were followers of Bet Shammai, for sure followed the opinion of Bet Shammai. And we answer, no. Rabbi Akiva gemareh istapak le velayadai Bet Hillel bechad b'shvat amur o b'chamisha b'shvat amur. No, in fact, Rabbi Akiva, he just wasn't sure what Bet Hillel's opinion was. Does Bet Hillel think that the new year for trees is the 1st of Shevat or the 15th of Shevat? He was following Bet Hillel no matter what. Apparently, he did not have our Girsah of the Mishnah, because in our Mishnah that you open up, it says clearly there that's Bet Shammai that says the 1st. But Rabbi Akiva lives before the completed Mishnah, and so in his version of the tradition, it was unclear which one Bet Hillel said. So he wants to be machmir for both versions of Bet Hillel, but he was never following Bet Shammai. Okay, Mativ Mor Zutra. Next question. Maasevi alda kallato shel Shammai hazaken ufichet hatamaziva vesikech al gabe mita b'shvil katan. So the daughter-in-law of Shammai hazaken had a child, and Shammai the elder broke open the roof, made a hole in the roof, and put sechach on the roof for the baby, because his opinion was even kitanim are obligated to be in a sukkah. So Shema Mina Asu. There you go. Shammai Zaken actually practiced his opinion and made a sukkah for his grandson. And that's a question. Atam, answer is Atam Haroe Omer Lapushe Avir Kaved. Says, no, that you're doing something that the action is ambiguous. And someone seeing it might say, maybe he just wants a sunroof in his house. He just wants some extra air in the house, and that's why he made a hole in his roof. Right? It could happen. Their roofs were not so solid, and in the summertime when it's not raining anyway, people might make a hole in their roof and open up the skylight. And so maybe that's why he did it. And it was not necessarily that he did it because of as a sukkah. And so what you see here then is that this was already showing a limitation, even according to one who says that Bet Shammai generally did not follow their opinion. Sorry, did not follow their opinion. Nevertheless, if it was possible to follow their opinion without raising any controversy, without anyone noticing, and then it would be not a problem of lotit kodedu. It's not causing factions. I'm not doing anything that would be blatantly against Bet Hillel, and so that case would be tolerated, even according to the opinion that Bet Shammai did not generally follow their opinion. Okay, next maaseh, mativ mor zutra. מעשה בשוקת יהוא שהייתה בירושלים, והייתה נקובה למקווה, וכל טהרות שבירושלים נעשית על גבה. ושלחו בית שמאי והרחיבוה, שבית שמאי אומרים עד שתיפחת ברובה. One time there was this trough of water that was called Shoket Yehu in Jerusalem, and it was opened up with a hole connecting it to a mikveh. And we know that once you have a mikveh that's a kosher mikveh, any water that's connected to it through a tube is that water also becomes mikveh water, which is a very useful halakha today, so that you can have a mikveh and then another pool next to it, and you just open up a hole between, and then that entire pool, which was drawn water, actually becomes mikveh water. And this was useful, and all the teharot, all the vessels that were in Jerusalem were purified there, one upon the other. Because it was an easy way to access a mikveh. And Bet Shammai went and they made the hole bigger, the hole between the trough and the mikveh, because Bet Shammai says that in order to connect two bodies of water together, it's not enough for there to be just 2 finger breaths, which was Bet Hillel's opinion, but rather it has to be a majority of the surface area. So Bet Shammai went and they opened it up more. So you see here that they followed their own opinion. Here's the source of where we know this halakha, Tanan, Eruv mikvaot keshoferet hanod. In order to join 2 bodies of water together, there has to be as big as the standard opening of a wineskin. This is a wineskin here, and that is standard opening, be'ovia, ubachalala kishtes baot chozrot limkoman, and its width and ubachalala, and in the hole. The point here is that the circumference of the opening and inside the mikveh has to be as big as the circumference of the outside of the tube of the wineskin. Right? So not the inside of the tube. Okay, anyway, you see, according to Bet Hillel, it's much smaller, and Bet Shammai went and made it bigger to follow their own opinion. Shema mina asu. So you see, Bet Shammai does follow their opinion. How are you going to answer that? Those who say that they did not? And we answer, no, someone looking will say, maybe he's not necessarily doing according to Bet Shammai. Maybe he just wants more flow of water, right? Wants the water to be changed and cleaned more often, so that there'll be more water coming in and out, flowing through it. And so, again, like the previous answer, the point is that Bet Shammai, even according to the one who says that Bet Shammai did not follow their opinion, they would try to follow their opinion as long as it did not violate Lotit Godadu, and did not raise anybody's awareness that they were doing it specifically against Bet Hillel. Good. Tashema, Damar Rabbi Elazar bar Sadok, כשהייתי לומד תורה אצל רבי יוחנן החורני, ראיתי שהיה אוכל פת חלבה במלח בשני בשורת. באתי והודעתי את אבא, אמר לי, הולך לו זיתים, והולכתי לו. ראה אותן שהן לכין, אמר לי, אין אני אוכל זיתים. Okay, we have a story of Rabbi Elazar ben Sadok, and he was learning Torah with Rabbi Yochanan HaChorani, and I saw, right, Rabbi Sadok says that when I was learning Torah with Rabbi Yochanan HaChorani, I saw, Rabbi Elazar testifies that he saw Rabbi Yochanan that he would eat just dry bread with salt, because it was a time of drought, not much food around. He would eat just, stale bread with salt. That's it. And I went and I told my father. He's Bar Sadok, so he went and told his father, Sadok, and he said, oh, go bring him some olives, right? Let him have some protein, some sustenance. And so I brought him some olives, and he looked at them and saw that they were wet, that they were liquidy, and anything that's liquidy, that is wet, we know can cause it to be susceptible to tum'ah. So he looked at that, And then Rabbi Yochanan ben Ochanani says, oh, I don't like olive. I don't need olives. Okay. So he didn't want to say that I suspect that these are tameh. I don't know where they've been. So if they were dry olives, then they're not susceptible to tumah, so he knows that they're okay. But the fact that they had some oil exude from them, and it could be in a way that that oil was wanted, and then came into contact with tumah, so maybe tameh. So he said it politely. Oh, I don't need olives. So he went. Bati v'otati et abi, went and told his father. Amali lech ve'emor lo chavit nekuba haita ela shesetamu hashemarim. Says, go back and tell him, I know that he likes olives and he would eat them. It's only because he doesn't know about the tumah. Go tell him that the barrel that they were in had a hole in it. That's significant. If the barrel has a hole in it, that means that the owner did not want the oil, so he made a hole so any oil that happened to come out just because from natural pressure of gravity would come out. And since he did not want the oil to exude, so a non-wanted liquid does not make the item susceptible to tum'ah. And the only reason why it's wet is because there was so much sediment that it clogged up the hole. And so it just happened to be by mistake that it got wet, but we did not want it to get wet. ותנן, חבית של זיתים מגולגלים, בית שמאי אומרים, אין סליחה להינקב, ובית הלל אומרים, סליחה להינקב. ומודים שאם נקבה וסתמוה שמרים, שהיא טהורה. Right, and this is subject to a machloket. Bet Shammai says, a barrel of olives, say it does not need to be perforated. The juice issuing from olives does not make it impure. Where Bet Hillel says no, is actually machmir here and says you have to undo it, make a hole in it. By the way, from yesterday, this is one case where Bet Hillel is machmir on tumah and tahara. But nevertheless, even Bet Hillel would agree that if it was stopped up only by sediment, then it's tahor. And so what the point of all this is that when they first saw that the Rabbi Yochanan ben Ochanani was being machmir, and he thought that these were tameh, so the suspicion is that he may have been following Bet Shammai. And the answer is no, don't worry about it, right? They're going to be tameh they're going to be tahor according to everyone. The Baraita continues, V'afal pi shetamid Shammai haya, kol masav lo haya ela kedivrei Bet Hillel. And so in this case, it was being actually machmir, and the Baraita adds that, forget what I just said. This whole time he's being machmir. So this whole time he's being machmir, which would be, according to Bet Shammai, it wouldn't be a problem at all. According to Bet Hillel, it would be a problem. So he's being machmir like Bet Hillel. And then the Baraita adds and says, even though he was a student of Shammai, nevertheless, he followed Bet Hillel. So here is one person who was a scholar of Bet Shammai, but he followed Bet Hillel. Now, if you say that generally Bet Shammai followed their own opinion, then that's why it's significant to say in this Baraita, even though he was Bet Shammai, he still followed Bet Hillel. He was the exception to the rule, but the rule is that everyone else in Bet Shammai followed Bet Shammai. But if he did not follow, if everyone else did not follow their own opinion, lo asu, right? That everyone followed Bet Hillel, then there would be no reason to say, oh, he was interesting because he followed Bet Hillel. Everyone followed Bet Hillel, and so this is actually a conclusive proof that Bet Shammai did generally follow their opinion. Okay, so what we saw before is that almost all the cases were able to resolve. The first one was a very strong question, and the first case that we saw yesterday proved that they would have had to at least tell each other. They did follow their own opinion, and they told each other. So we the Gemara brings a strong proof to begin with. And then the proofs afterwards are ambiguous, right? But although you have to really dig and reinterpret the words to make it fit with the opinion that says that they did not practice their opinion. But then the Gemara saves the 3 more strong proofs for the end. And so you see, this is a strong proof that has no answer for. All right, next one. Tashema shalu et Rabbi Yoshua. Sarat habat mahu. They came to Rabbi Yoshua and says, what do you think about the co-wife of one's daughter? What do you think is the halacha? Amar lehem machloket. This is always a good answer, right? Anytime if a rabbi doesn't know an answer, he could always safe to say machloket. Okay, but in this case, it is true. Machloket bet Shammai u bet Hillel. So that's what his answer was. Yeah, this is subject to machloket. And they said, yeah, we know that. We're asking halacha kedivrei mi. What is the law? מה להם? מפני מה אתם מכניסים ראשי בין שני הרים גדולים, בין שתי מחלוקות גדולות, בין בית שמאי ובית הלל, מתיירא אני שמא ירוסו גולגולתי. So Yoshua tries to dodge, says, why are you asking me such a question? And you're putting my head, smashing it between two great mountains. The two great mountains are Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. And you're entering me within Mahalokot Gedolot. Now, if you translate Mahalokot as controversy, then this sort of makes sense. Between two controversies, there's only one controversy here. The word Mahaloket actually has two meanings. It could also mean a group, like a machlaka, like you say, Machloket Korach Va'adato, that faction, that group, that sect. So you're putting me in between two groups, between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. I am afraid that they will crush my skull. I would rather say no comment. Thank you very much. I don't want to answer that. This is an amazing source because it shows you just how heated these discussions were, that Rabbi Yoshua was afraid to answer. This is the same Rabbi Yoshua that stood up to the Rabban Gamliel in the famous Rosh Hashanah story. So he was not one to be shy. Okay, אבל אני מעיד לכם על שתי משפחות גדולות שהיו בירושלים. But Rabbi Yoshua does add, I will tell you this much and testify that there were two great families in Jerusalem in past generations. This would have to have been, back in the times of the Bet HaMikdash. So he's remembering something that happened a couple of generations before him. And he said, Mishpachot bet Sov'i mi bet Achmai, Mishpachat bet Kofai mi bet Mekoshes. These are their names. I'm not making this up. I know the details about it. Shehem bnei Sarot umehem kohanim gedolim v'shimeshu al gabei hamizbeach. And they were the descendants of a co-wife of an erva, and nevertheless they were chosen to be Kohen Gadol, and they even served on the Mizbeach. And so, therefore, you see that there was no problem of mamzerut in these cases, and no problem of pegam, of a halal, because then they wouldn't be able to be a Kohen Gadol. And you see that this happened, and it was totally fine. Okay, now let's analyze this. If they actually followed their own opinions, that's what Rabbi Yoshua is afraid to say the wrong thing. But if they did not practice their own opinion, Bet Shammai, instead everyone followed Bet Hillel, then it'd be a simple answer. He could just say, we follow Bet Hillel, and everybody would be fine. So this proves that they must have practiced their opinion. And even if, so now we answer, and even if Bet Shammai did act, why would he be afraid? Rabbi Yoshua had his own opinion regarding what causes mamzerut, and he said one can only be a mamzer if he follows something that would require capital punishment. Only a few of the arayot require capital punishment. They all deserve karet. That's true, but they don't all deserve capital punishment. And this case of even if someone would take his sister-in-law, which is Yisur Karet, it still would not be a mamzer, not according to anybody, not even Bet Hillel, because Rabbi Yoshua happens to say that there's no mamzerut, right? We already saw Rabbi Akiva who goes to the opposite extreme and is machmir, and he says there is mamzerut even for a lav. So that's the minority opinion that's most stringent. Most rabbi sages say there is mamzerut anytime there is karet. Rabbi Yoshua is the most lenient and says it's only mamzerut if mitot betin, and that wouldn't apply in this case. So why was he afraid in any case? So we answer, oh, even if there would not be any mamzerut issue, there still could be a pegam issue that if someone married someone they were not allowed to, this could happen either way. If one did yibum, and that would cause pegam, or if she went and married outside without doing halisa, that would also cause a pegam, and the children would not be kohanim, and certainly could not be kohen gadol. And that's what he's afraid of, that whatever he says, one is going to say, one party is going to come and complain to him and says, what are you doing? Why'd you say that? You're calling my people in my group pegamim. And how do we know that's pagum? Mikal v'chomer me'almana. Ma'almana she'en isura noheg bakol benha pagum. Zo she'isura shaveh bakol, right, lo kol sheken. So we learn this from almana, a widow, that her prohibition does not apply to everyone. Everyone is allowed to marry a widow except for a kohen gadol, right? Even other kohanim can marry a widow. And nevertheless, the Torah says that she will be, it's a pasuk, it says that if a kohen gadol does marry a widow, then the child will be pagum, halal or halala. And so if that's true for almana, then all the more so regarding the cases of a prohibition that would be alav, or karet, then for sure the children would be pegamim because they are prohibited from marrying more people. Okay, that's how we know they're pegam, and that's why he was afraid. Okay, so now one more point about this case. We have a question about this case. When they asked the students came and asked Rabbi Yoshua, what do you think about Sarat Tabat, about the co-wife, right? Is she allowed or not? And he never answered the question. Oh, but he did answer is about, I know that the children, the descendants of such a case are okay. So how come they asked about one thing and he never answered that question? So we explained the story as follows. Actually, their question was a double question, right? There's always a student or reporter in any Q&A that says, I have two questions, right? And so they get a second question, and they meant two in one. Sarot mai, first of all, the co-wife herself, right? Is she permitted or not permitted? And if you follow Bet Hillel that say there's no yibum, no chalitza necessary, she just goes and marries outside. In that case, Bnei Sarot Bet Hillel leBet Shammai mahu. If you think that, then those who do not do yibum or chalitza and they go off and marry like Bet Hillel, what will Bet Shammai think about their children? We know Bet Shammai will consider that a lav to marry hachutza, but what about the children? Are they kosher or not? And that's what he answered. And he said, listen, I know a case, and the great-great-grandchildren were kohanim gedolim, and no one argued, not even Bet Shammai. You wouldn't be a kohen gadol if there was some controversy about it. And therefore, you see that his answer is that Bet Shammai, even according to Bet Shammai, they would be okay. Okay, why is it important? Why do we need to know this? What's the practical consequence? Lemifshat velad machzir girushato leBet Hillel. If since we're following Bet Hillel anyway, it still is relevant, because what about a case of machzir girushato? Someone is married, divorces, his wife goes and marries another guy, divorces from him and returns to her first husband. That is prohibited, a sur lav only. What will be the status of a child that does that? Whatever you say about the someone who needs to do chalitza and goes out and marries outside was also a sur lav. Whatever you say about that will be the same thing here. So, and the question would depend on this. Mi kamdinan kal vachomer. Uma almana lekohen gadol sheni surah shaveh bakol bena pagum. Zo shi surah shaveh bakol enodin shebena pagum. And you can make a kal vachomer if a widow to a kohen gadol, and he's the only one. It's a very limited prohibition. Only he's the only one that cannot marry a widow, and yet their children are pagum, cannot be kohanim or married to kohanim. So this person the law of Machzir Gerushato, not the specific person, but anyone who is Machazir Gerushato, that this law applies to all people, right? To Kohanim, non-Kohanim, and so all the more so, it should be Pagum. So that would be on the one hand, then you'd say it would be Pagum, but on the other hand, Odir Ma'ikal Mifrach, Ma Almana Shi Atzma Mithalelet. On the other hand, you could say, no, for the Almana herself is disqualified to the Kohen Gadol, so it makes sense. If they violate it, then her children will also be disqualified. Whereas Machazir Gerushato is not a specific prohibition to a Kohen. She can go and marry a Kohen if she gets divorced from the first guy. No, actually, a divorcee cannot marry a Kohen. The point is, from her, she herself, the widow is different. She herself is disqualified. So with her, if high priest has intercourse with her, she's disqualified from marrying any member of the high priesthood, including common priests. That's the point, right? If a Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol makes her, herself, not only her children, makes her prohibited to everyone, whereas a remarried divorcee is not disqualified from marrying into the priesthood. So therefore you would not make a kal vachomer. And then his answer was, V'amar lehu sarot mityare ani. Bnei sarot ani ma'id lachem. And his answer was, listen, I'm not going to tell you anything about the law of the co-wife because I'm afraid, right, as the opinions there are too great. But I can tell you that the children of sarot, are okay, no matter what, right? According to, I hold that the children of even karet are not mamzerim if it's not chayave lavin, and if that's if you follow Bet Hillel, and if you that's if you follow Bet Shammai, and if you follow Bet Hillel, then I also think that the children are not pegamim, and that's why I told you that the great grandchildren of those families could be Kohanim Gedolim. Okay, but anyway, the point of this whole source is that he's only afraid that they're going to crush his skull because Bet Shammai is in fact following their own opinion. So this is still a relevant and hot debate. And tomorrow we'll see the last proof that in fact Bet Shammai must have practiced their own opinion. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen v'Amen.